Oseo, Cherokee
Oseo.
greeting, wave the great feather. Oh, Dios Imchinia. That's the Yaqui greeting for the relatives over there in the village of Guadalupe, Arizona, where I have been known as a padrino as old as 40 years ago. And today, December 12th, is the feast day of the Virgin de Guadalupe. She's the spiritual chief of Mexico and all Mexicanos and Mexicanas like that. And so I really have to say something here about her. Can go down here and look at this piece down here. This is a picture of her. It's been fastened in, interestingly, to a ceramic roof tile here. So definitely saying something of her protection quality for us there. The story, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but the main thing is that the Virgin, you know, is not a mortal virgin. It's really, in English, you would say Our Lady of Guadalupe. It mainly means goddess. She's a goddess, not a mortal there. And Guadalupe is a Spanish name from Spain, but Guadalupe has been totally, you know, taken into Mexico and being Mexicanized, however we could say that. So many people have the name Guadalupe or Lupe, very much so. So that's who she is. She's the chief spiritual qualities of Mexico, nation and people. Myself, I was on a student visa in Mexico City. I was there doing a study. I was a graduate art student, and my theme for my master's degree was the Mexican art history. So that's what I was doing there. And my chief interest there was Diego Rivera, where there are many of his paintings and murals. While I was there, I encountered a native Mexican woman. She worked at the Social Security building there near Chapultepec, and she was actually a Zapotec from a native of the state of Oaxaca. But anyway, the encounter was that she really felt that I needed to meet the Virgin de Guadalupe. And so she took me there. She brought me to that place. That was a huge basilica, is what I call it, a huge open basilica with birds flying through and so forth, where the picture, however you want to call it, you know, it's an apparition or it's a painting or however it's come to be there, which is the chief icon throughout Mexico, which I just showed you. And in those days, you know, it was very easy to, you know, walk up a little ramp, a step ramp, you know, right up to it. I was very close to it. And it's been there for, you know, what was that, 400 years. So it's, you know, sort of a mystery in that way. And that's how I came to meet Guadalupe and know about it and about the image, as I can rightly call it. Behind the basilica is properly a small hill, which seemed rather steep and small hill. This is the actual shrine of her, where she had appeared to Juan Diego. And that the place was, you know, pre-Spanish, seems to be known as Tenochtitlan, the hill or something of Tenochtitlan, basically the earth goddess, and so forth. And so that's sort of the introduction here. And in other words, I feel that it's important for me to acknowledge this. Last night on the Mexican channel, around midnight, started at midnight, is being televised live from Mexico City. And now that the basilica that I had visited has been totally replaced by something that's very, very modern. And the image, the framed image, you know, now looks, you know, far more sumptuously presented than when I saw it. So, but anyway, it was all there, and people filing through, huge files of people, you know, walking through the place to very briefly, you know, look at the image. And then there were singers dedicating their songs to him in sequence of singers. So that's all the introduction there. And then I'm coming over here to this piece here. This is my painting. Now it's going to look very different from the customary image of Guadalupe. And actually it's an apparition. It's my apparition of her as she appeared out of the image itself. And so that's why we're saying a Mexican woman who had taken me to be the author of this image had asked me, you know, "Oh, Carlos, why have you, you know, misrepresented our Holy Mother that way?" And Coyote has permission to deform the empirical forms, somewhat, I would say, like the blues man who bends the notes on his harmonica, and that's how he plays that African sounding music on a European instrument. So like that. So that, anyway, that's this here is not at the actual painting. This is a poster print of my painting, which is very large. I think it was 4 feet by 5 feet, painted on plywood, and it's been in Nevada here. So that's my main introduction here to honor the Feast of Guadalupe and the Guadalupanos in the village of Guadalupe in Arizona. And thank you very much on that. Now my theme today is continuing with the owl. Again, between the end of October, Samhain in Celtic, and the winter solstice, this is a very auspicious, particularly fertile time in the ancient, we'll say, culture of the Great Mother, matriarch, or anything like that. So, and this is a good time to be talking about owl, and whether owl is a portent of death or is the guide, soul guide. These are all fairly nominal, but there is a culture. There's an actual culture for owl, who is very old, very old. So to start that off, you know, I'm going to have a little story here, and this little story is actually a Navajo story. I've known it for some time, and for that, if you would focus on this image over here, because that's what the story is about. So it's called, you know, the Owl's Nest, you know, Takanhinhan Wakopi in Lakota. Coyote, ever interested in how the other animals manage to do that which is in their nature, they're able to do. And it might be to his advantage if he could do it too. Now, owl, of course, has the advantage of silently getting the drop on his prey. Now, Coyote says, what if I could do that? Well, the only thing Coyote could see was that owl's nest, Wakopi. And that's just what he's up to. Once up there and seated in that nest, he exclaimed, "I want you to fly," he says to the nest, and the nest took off and flew with Coyote in it. It moved through the air in the night, hooting as it went, until Coyote says, "Whoa, let's stop right here." And the nest stopped hovering there in the night and the falling snow. It being so dark and needing some light, Coyote reached out and grasped a paw full of fresh white snow. Woo-hoo-hoo! And the snow gave him light. Eventually, the owl's nest and Coyote landed down on the ground. And it also happened to be a prairie dog town. So then, of course, one of those prairie dog residents came running over to greet them. And when that prairie dog saw that the nest had a light, and that light was being lit with only the snow. He exclaimed out loud, "Hey fellas, look! The snow is burning." And right away, the light went out. So there's a great story for the owl, and that's the illustration that I have here, and how that the snow connects in all this. I'll talk about that a little bit. But first I'm going to go on to other things that I have here, all talking about the owl. So if you go over here, you can look at this, and this is my drawing. My drawing here is Feather Woman. And this piece here I introduced last week is my replica that's 10,000 years old. 10,000 years old because it was found there in the Spirit Cave in Nevada. That's the name of the cave where a person was buried 10,000 years ago. The climate there has been very, very dry all this time, so things don't rot. And so this picture here, exactly, I've added the feather, of course, but my replica is accurate. It's carved out of wood, and it was seemingly sort of stuck in the ground because that pointed tail there, with the person who was interred, who is known as the Spirit Caveman there. And I'm having this go along with her. So down here I've created this piece, you can see, and in Lakota this is Hinhan Sa Lek Lek Ya Wakan, meaning the red striped owl is sacred. So from 10,000 years ago up to present times, the people have maintained the sacred power of the red striped owl. That's what I'm illustrating here. Now, next thing we can go is we can go up here. This is my painting here in this subject. And to give you some way of seeing what's going on here, obviously you can see this looks like the owl. Now the owl, you know, it's easy to say the owl is the soul guide, that sort of thing. But really he's more of a spy. You know, that would be really closer to, you know, he's spying. And even the saying goes, you know, you better, you know, pull your drapes at night or that owl will be spying, peeking in on you. Here are these figures here. What these are. Teepee here. I think we have to go down here and we have to look at this image here because I have a teepee. This is actually a Navajo dry painting. It's very particular because Navajos do not employ these dwellings at all. They live in hogans. And here is the image of a teepee, and this strange aperture are the ears of the teepee. And then coming out here, it means to send a voice, to send a prayer. And this figure here is the Wayanagi, is the guardian spirit. So this is all, you know, rather a sacred piece, you know, right here. Now, back to my painting up here, you can see these. The inside of the teepee, in the old days, with a lot of labor, they made the covers out of the buffalo skin. A lot of labor. Nowadays, of course, people use canvas. But either way, on the inside of the teepee, there's a lining. This lining is ozankin oskpe, and this means that the lining on the inside, it was made of stretched skin, nowadays canvas, and tied to the poles. So this was, you know, give some insulation to people living inside of the teepees. These teepees can be very big or not so big, but basically people lived in them. Or the saying is that the teepee is the land that we have always lived in, and the poles are the women who hold up the earth. It's like that, goes together. And so this lining inside was decorated. It's decorated with porcupine quills, long, like oblong strips, you know, that were rounded like that. And these are the porcupine quills I have here. And what am I meaning by this? I'm meaning that these are, my images here is the simile for soul, because the soul is immortal here, and it's going together with the owl here. And again, these are representing in a symbolic way the we call porcupine decorated. The porcupine quills are like flatted out, and then they're dyed with very bright colors and woven. People wove them into moccasins and jackets and so forth. And so that's what they are. And here alongside of them, this is also very telling. This is a grass. This is a very tall grass. You see it out there that has feathery tops on it. And this is called, shili or shilihu, meaning, the long stems of it, like that. And it's kind of cognate with the word shili, meaning undecided. If you just look at me for a minute with the camera, it means like, say the grass is going like this. So undecided means who knows? Who knows where, this spirit or this soul is going to go and where he's going to arrive. So the grass and this idea that we're talking about, that somebody is being transformed, transported into the ancient land, basically, is what I'm doing with all of this. And again, to realize the owl is a spirit, but it's more than that, definitely something else like that. In the story that I did last week of the ant and the owl, if I continued in that, where now the ant is a person who has come back in the world, but changed, and his relatives really are not going to recognize him. And what I'm saying about it, without going through the whole story, all the time the two owls are around him one way or another. They're always spying on him. So this has to do with the person who has changed. Now, to introduce here for a second, this book is Carlos Castaneda. This was actually the first book, 1968, actually called The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui Way of Knowledge. This started out the series of several books of this teaching. And what I'm mentioning here is that the author has said he's translated this from Spanish. At any rate, that Don Juan has said the sorcerer or the shaman has to make death his advisor. Well, that doesn't exactly line up correctly with the ancient knowledge that he has actually rescued, he and Belisario. More likely, what's being translated as death is actually the owl. The owl would be your advisor, because once that you have gone through this like reincarnation and come back into the world, the owl indeed will be your advisor. And that would be a more accurate way. Also, that Don Juan had said, it's not death, but dying. And what he means by dying, the dying out of life is really the eagle, yes, which is the thunderbird in the Eagle's Gift book. That's really the eagle who is actually consuming the person's awareness. And this is very similar to the matriarchal of, at the end of our life, we are born into her. So that's just, a gist of that on this, making death your advisor, making the owl your advisor. So now, since we've been here at the teepee, let me go over here to this one here. This is a kind of a resemblance to a teepee, and it's going to have a little story that kind of goes along with that, and that is, we're talking about death. In the beginning, wherever long, long ago, the beginning was no death. There was no death. And how they managed things Again, we're making a little distinction here between death, something final, and dying. There's a little subtlety there. So we're going back to the early times, you know. Somehow the wise men or the medicine men had known or had been told to put a feather on top of the lodge here. So basically a black and white feather on top of the lodge. Somehow he fixed it up there. And when you see that feather turn blood red and fall to the ground, then that you know that somebody has died. So then what they did, the wise men, like that, this is all in the lodge, then they chanted, Nami Nami no ne, Nami Nami no, Nami Nami no ne, Nami Nami no ne, Nami Nami no. And what they're doing is they're calling the whirlwind. Over here, this is the whirlwind. And the whirlwind comes from the west. And the whirlwind is called, you know, Wamini Yomini, Wamini Yomini, which also means the cocoon. And the whirlwind comes, Wamini Wamini, from the west and comes and circles around the lodge and then enters in through the door, which is facing east. And there, like a cocoon, I suppose, the person who had been previously dying emerges out of it, and that's why I have here this little fellow wrapped up as if he just was coming out of the cocoon. So now Coyote happens along, and he's always an unexpected kind of character and things that are working good, and says, well, I can see, you know, what's going to happen if you keep doing things this way. The world will just be full of people. You're just going to have way too many people. So I think I'm going to have to modify that. So the next time it happened that the feather turned red, fell to the ground, and the medicine men got together and they're chanting Nami Nami no, Nami Nami no, and Wamini Yomini, you know, comes spinning up from the west and goes around, and it goes around, you know, the lodge. And just then Coyote jumps up and he closes the flaps on the lodge. So the whirlwind couldn't go in. And the whirlwind, you know, said, I guess not, you know, and spun off, never to be seen again. And so on account of that, Coyote has been blamed for that death. You know, that kind of thing. Now the other thing is here, we had some snow here. And here, over here, this is a snowy owl, very good replica. And down here we have a snowy owl. Now we're using the language of Lakota, Hinhan. So Hinhan, it means for the owl. It's the generic term for the owl, but there's also all the specific different kinds of owls, but they all are Hinhan. It means falling from the sky, like falling from the sky, like how snow, you know, is silent. So that's the whole idea that's in this Native American view of the owl. It's coming down from the sky. And that's why we like the actual snowy owl itself, you know, is Hinhanska. So that's why I have them here in this way. And it kind of, you know, relates to the owl's nest, you know, and the snow with light in it, like that. So in the culture of the owl is taking it into something even more subtle, and that is the downy feather, the softness of the owl. You know, owl feathers are very soft. Everything about the owl is very soft and silent. And even here, up here, you know, look at this piece here. This is a sacred piece, actually it was made by a Seri woman that's, you know, extolling the downy feather. So this is a very, very special piece, you know, for me, for the downy feather, and I'm using it here to talk about the downy feather. How can this mind be smooth enough to receive the imprint of a soft, fluffy down feather? Who are you going to ask for a sense of softness, tenderness, and the like? How will we know if the mind, or which kind of mind, is really thoughtful of this request? So in this culture, imprint the owl on the mind, naktagya, to stamp on my mind the owl and this softness that way. And what's all this? You know, because power, everybody knows power. Everybody's out after power. Here we have the remind of the coming together of two opposite energies, and how these opposite energies are resolved in, well, I would say, in a enlightening way. Everything that we're talking about here all has to do with what we call our consciousness, or our mind knowledge, and becoming enlightened that way, you know, to completely fill out. So yes, anybody can think, you know, power, power, power for anything. Well, what about, you know, this softness? What about this softness that is represented by the soft downy feather? Even, you know, with people who follow the eagle, the downy feather of the eagle is come from, you know, the part of his body that is the breast, his heart. So even, you know, for all the glory of the feathers, of tail feathers and wing feathers and everything, but the most special is that soft downy feather that's the closest to the eagle's heart. Now, a couple other things that I'm just showing here to go along with this. Here, this piece over here, oh, it's modern, but it's old, and it's from India. So here's India, and it looks very archaic with the spiral eyes, because there are petroglyphs that look like that, just like that. Then we can go over here to this piece. Again, this is a stone carving of an owl in a pipe bowl. This is a pipe bowl, and this is from the Adena Hopewell culture of 2,000 years ago, around there, that time. And actually, what kind of stem, I don't have a stem for this, we don't really know, because none of the stems have survived. Maybe they were just reeds, or maybe carved like recent people do. But anyway, this is the stone carving for the owl, and we're looking at 2,000 years ago. And of course, we think very much just like today. People use this smoke, you know, as an offering. This kind of smoking, you know, ceremonial or ritually is, you know, not to inhale and to have benefits of the narcotic, but to make offerings, to make smoke that rises to the Great Spirit. So that's the way we have all of these things here. Now, of course, you're going to want me to finish with the Mary Oliver poem, and I'm going to do that. And this poem, it was necessary for me to tell you all about the snow and the downy feather and snow falling out of the sky and all of that for her poem here, which she has titled, "White Owl Flies Into and Out of the Field." Coming down out of the freezing sky with its depth of light, like an angel or a Buddha with wings, it was beautiful and accurate, striking the snow and whatever was there with a force that left the imprint of the tips of its wings, 5 feet apart, and the grabbing thrust of its feet, and the indentation of what had been running through the white valleys of the snow. And then it rose gracefully and flew back to the frozen marshes to lurk there like a little lighthouse in the blue shadows. So I thought, maybe death isn't darkness after all, but so much light wrapping itself around us, as soft as feathers, that we are instantly weary of looking and looking, and shut our eyes, not without amazement, and let ourselves be carried, as through the translucence of mica, to the river that is without the least dapple or shadow, that is nothing but light, scalding, ortal light, in which we are washed and washed out of our bones.